Our first speaker tonight is Zach Alexander. Zach is the lead web developer at Portable, a Y Combinator company making cross-platform mobile development tools. In former lives, he has been a graphic designer, a chef, and a professional gambler, and he studied math and philosophy in undergrad. Zach will be speaking today about 12 lessons from 12 months of using Meteor in production. Please give Zach a warm welcome.
Really quick poll. How many people have never built a Meteor app before in their life? Could you raise your hands? Okay, cool. How many people use Meteor every day at work? Okay. How many people are somewhere in between? Okay. That was a pretty good percentage of people raising their hands at some point. There's that problem where no one raises their hands. So that's the title of the talk. You already know that. If you want to see the slides, you can go to zachalexander.com/meteor and follow along. So very brief overview. I was a Rails developer a year ago, but for various reasons was able to start using Meteor pretty much exclusively at work, which I've been really happy about, spoiler. And a lot of people that give talks here, I feel like are pretty specialized and have a lot of expertise in one specific area of Meteor or some package or something like that. I don't have any of that, but I've had to solve a pretty wide variety of small to medium-sized problems using Meteor and with people depending on me to do that. So I think I'm a pretty good generalist at this point. And so rather than going really deep into one topic, I thought it would be nice to just sort of cover a lot of different things for a few minutes each. So this is sort of like the BuzzFeed talk. I'm aiming this talk at new Meteor devs who have used it, who like it, but maybe aren't sure yet whether it's suitable for more serious projects. Also for other web devs who are considering switching and maybe aren't sure whether it's ready for that. And then in a different vein, I think this talk might be interesting for as a kind of case study for the core team, for people who build packages, as a big picture look into the life of a working web developer who counts on all of these tools to do his job. So a brief overview of the 12 months that I'm talking about. But what do I mean by production? I'm mostly talking about important people will be mad at you if your web app stops working. So if you have investors and you're spending their money, or you have users and they're spending money, or if they have sensitive data, or if there's a lot of time pressure, all of this adds up to this Meteor app is no longer just fun. It may also be fun, but it also involves a lot of responsibility to your coworkers, to users, to other people. That involves stress. So that's kind of what I'm getting at when I say using it in production. I'm not necessarily talking about horizontal scaling, although that's interesting. The companies I've worked for have mostly been enterprisey B2B, so I don't actually have to worry about super high volumes of traffic. So the 12 months that I've been using it, my first exposure to it was at a company called Sorcery. That's a Rails app. And Sorcery makes a wholesale sourcing and payments platform for restaurants and chefs. It's a very cool product. And a year ago, for various reasons, we did a sort of experiment where we rebuilt parts of the platform using Meteor, and it was me and the other devs only, it was our first exposure to really using Meteor. And the project didn't eventually survive, but everyone in the company was really amazed at how fast it was and how many features we could ship in a very short amount of time. Since March, I've been working at Portable. Portable makes tools for mobile native not web developers, native developers. So in contrast to a lot of software companies where there's one monolithic web app or mobile app, our product is a mobile SDK which can be marketed and served and consumed in many different ways. So we have several different brands. Each brand has several different sites. So there's a lot of different web properties that I manage. And since I've been there, I've been using Meteor for pretty much all new web apps, with the exception of Discourse for forums, which is a Rails thing. Let me show you a couple of these. So that's a portable.com. That's a Rails app. That's sort of our enterprisey platform. I I had another one up, but this is fine. So this was probably the first like actual Meteor app that I built, and it doesn't do a whole lot. There's a blog. It pulls content from a forum, but this is probably the most complicated web app that I've built with Meteor. And this isn't a demo, so I'm not going to go in a lot of depth here. But the core feature set of this is similar to something like the Apple, like the Mac store, the Mac App Store, or Google Play. So we're selling first-party content. Third parties are also able to upload their products. Hopefully, users buy them. We take a 30% cut of that. So there's a lot of features packed into that, and there's a lot of things that can go wrong. And I just showed you some examples. And that is a good segue to, so they made me put this slide in. It was in the contract. No. So this is the spoiler. I'm going to get into some of the challenges that I've had with Meteor in the rest of the talk, but basically it's been really awesome. I initially started out liking Meteor. It was a very good quality of life thing as a developer, but I wasn't convinced that it was the sort of thing that you could build something that handled lots of money with. So I was cautious, but at a portable, I started out with like the first project that I used Meteor for was like a documentation site. So it was kind of low stakes, and I had a good experience with that. And so I basically ramped up to more and more complicated projects. And then eventually this fall, when we were like, yeah, we want to actually build this asset store, at that point I was like, we totally are using Meteor. I trust that it's going to work, and it's going to be faster than using Rails or something else. And really, the past year, I have not had many unpleasant surprises. The ones I have had have mostly been with like third-party packages. The core platform has been just amazing. So I have no regrets, and I highly recommend it to pretty much everyone, with a few caveats, which I'll get into. So it's so awesome that I feel bad because I think twice now, like on the weekend when Meteor development group people like want to just not think about Meteor for like a couple hours. Like I'm like, oh my God, Meteor is awesome. Can we talk about Meteor? And like they're like, can we like talk about this some other time? So I'm sorry, guys. But so Meteor is awesome overall, but there are these funny exceptions, and I feel like there's a pattern where you trade big problems for smaller, weirder problems that you maybe took for granted before. And I apologize that these aren't very. I'm going to give two little examples of this pattern. I don't know if these are still current, like maybe with the latest version of Meteor and latest version of Iron Router and so on, these would work fine. But like, anchor fragments, like jumping around a page, like a table of contents, that just works out of the box with like a web browser. But I've had a lot of issues getting that to work in all the edge cases with Meteor and Iron Router. Another one that may or may not be an issue for you, if you need like a really deep Facebook integration with your web app where every page has a dynamically set like open graph header tag or head tag, that might be hard. That would be pretty trivial in a lot of web frameworks, but I've had a lot of trouble getting that to work in Meteor. So I don't know, on net, I think it's awesome, but just sort of mentally prepare yourself for like once in a while, you're like, wow, I always assumed this would be easy, but there's a few things that aren't. So overall, I actually really like the what seems to be the philosophy of the core team, which is making Meteor not extremely opinionated. So it's flexible. You can use it in a lot of different ways. It's easier to get started with. But I'm not like an evangelist for like MVC or MM, all those other acronyms. But I do think for once a web app gets to be a certain level of complexity, it's just going to be harder to reason about it if you're not organizing your code according to some principle, and MVC is one good one. So the platform itself is not really MVC, but you should probably make it that way if you want to use it seriously. And so for models, there isn't, that I've come across, a really great solution. I'm mostly using Minimongoid, but it's a little rough around the edges in some ways. I see some people kind of creating their own solutions, but I wish that the core team or some package author, or maybe I should try to do this, would just make a really awesome package that was like built for Meteor. Another thing with models, I didn't know about this for the longest time. So there's a method you can pass to a collection which will automatically modelize it according to whatever you specify whenever you do a fetch or a find one. And this is really handy because if you don't know this, which I didn't for many, many months, you're constantly thinking like, okay, is this object like a Mongo object, like a raw Mongo object, or has this been modelized and do I have access to all these helper methods and so on? I've gotten pretty used to thinking that way, but save yourself that trouble and just use transform when you can. Controllers, I think everyone's using Iron Router, but that's where your controllers go. So this is a big one. I feel like I got like twice as fast when doing client-side work in Meteor after I figured this out. So if you're not familiar with the term data context, it's basically like the current object whenever you're in a template. And so some tutorials that I see seem to encourage a pattern where like every time you need dynamic content in a template, it's like, oh, well, you just go to the JavaScript file and you write a helper. And that gets old really fast if you're doing a lot of templates. And it turns out if you just think for a minute about what is the current object, or have you even set one? If you haven't set one, you probably should. So like imagine like like a blog post. You have a title, you have content. You don't want to have to like write helpers for those. You just set the context to like a post object, and those template tags will just work. There's a really good Discover Meteor article. The underline means that's a link. So if you go to the website, you can click there and see the article, or you can just Google it. Don't use session for everything. Maybe this is just me, but I don't know. I feel like the docs are like, oh, you can use session for this. And it's super handy sometimes, but like often when I'm like, I don't know, it seems to get messy. And if you look for other alternatives, there's often alternatives that don't use global state. So maybe this one might be a tiny bit controversial. So allow deny is, it's good that exists, but I almost never use them. I think I literally have never used deny, and I use allow in like very minimal ways, like allow if admin, And the reason for that, I used to think that I was doing it wrong, but recently I decided that like the reason I don't really do that is that like using allow deny as the sole place where you authorize changes to the database means you have to reason about authorization like in the abstract, all of the things relating to a collection in the aggregate, like in one place, and then in isolation to other collections. And that's just like a weird problem that isn't intuitive for me. So if most of your database modifications from the client happen in server methods, I just find that a lot easier to think about, and maybe that will help you as well. So I'm not trying to start a fight with this. It's like, I actually for a while was like, okay, well, I'm just gonna like try the Mongo way of doing things, And I actually think Mongo, like, I'm sure if you're really into Mongo and you're into using it in production, like, you know what you're doing, but I personally just find it a little too loosey-goosey. It's really great as an easy way to get started and have data without having to like have all the rigmarole of SQL. But like once I start really caring about my data and wanting it to be consistent and so on, I just really miss SQL. So SQL support is coming at some point, but in the meantime, I'm increasingly like avoiding like Mongo-y conventions and just sort of pretending that I'm using SQL. So that means things like normalizing your collections. If you normalize your collections, you're going to have to learn about reactive joins. And these are some packages for schemas and stuff like that can also help you have a bit more of a SQL experience. Server routes, I haven't used these extremely heavily, but I have had to implement like APIs and DRM for things that don't use the web and they just use JSON. Single sign-on between a Rails app and a Meteor app, redirects. So this has all been pretty straightforward and it's worked pretty well. Iron Router server routes, I think, are probably the best tool for most cases. So if you ever need to make an API, just use that. And then there's the web app package if you need like more down to the metal abilities. So deployment, I feel like that's maybe a little bit optimistic because like I feel like deployment kind of sucks right now. And maybe that's my fault because I'm using Heroku. Don't make fun of me. It's partly for legacy reasons. It's all the main downside of Heroku is that you can't actually scale. Like they only support one server, one web app server. Otherwise, it's great. So it's not even going to work for me. Like I need to scale some of my apps soon. So the main like more serious options are Modulus and Meteor Up. I've used Modulus a fair amount and I like it. I tried to use Meteor Up recently and ran into a bunch of issues, and I was like, I could spend hours trying to troubleshoot these, or I could use the platform as a service, which the whole point of that is they save me from having to do that. So your mileage may vary, but that was my experience. I just really want there to exist like a Heroku Modulus-y service that the features that I really want are like Git-based deployments, which Modulus doesn't have, and the ability to run Meteor Shell on the server, which I don't think Modulus can do. So hopefully someone is working on that. This was probably the worst experience I had with Meteor. This wasn't at a portable. This was a personal project, but it was like for a nonprofit that had like a lot of users, and there was like a launch date, and there was all this stuff happening where it was around the upgrade between 0.8 to 0.9 when a lot of packages were being changed, and some of them weren't migrated properly. I was using a third-party Accounts UI Bootstrap package. I can't remember which one, and I all of a sudden I just was having tons of issues with users not being able to log in or being logged out. And eventually I figured it out, but I had to like rip out a bunch of UI and redo it, and the whole experience just really sucked because I couldn't figure out why it wasn't working. So my takeaway from that is accounts are like pretty mission critical. If you really need to customize, like write your own accounts package, like knock yourself out. But I think most people should just be using the core packages because they work and they're well maintained. So if you don't like the way the default packages work, which sometimes I don't, just customize them with CSS and JavaScript. You can also get more hardcore customizing that package. But I just don't really trust using third-party packages for accounts anymore because I just don't want to deal with that. Otherwise, packages are starting to be pretty awesome. So even like 6 months ago, I feel like I would like look for packages and I wouldn't find things or they would be janky. But increasingly, like I'm like, oh, is there a package for this? Yeah. Does it work? Yeah. So that's pretty exciting. And I've already mentioned a bunch, but I want to just call out a couple that have been great. Collection.fs is for file uploads. It's a little overwhelming because there's a lot of options, but if you just kind of give it the time to read the docs, like you'll be fine. And it works really great. Autoform is also really awesome. I never was into form helpers as a Rails dev because I just felt like they got in my way. But there's enough like client-side reactivity and stuff that you might want, like validating, against a schema and stuff like that. That I feel like this does actually, it's worth the trade-off of having to learn a forms tool. And then the last thing that I have learned a number of times over the past few months is that testing is a work in progress. It's getting there. Velocity has come a long way. But probably the biggest thing I learned is I kept trying to get Velocity to work, and I couldn't get it to work. And I realized that part of that was not really Velocity's fault. Velocity like depends on like other frameworks like Jasmine or Mocha or Nightwatch. So in my experience, like it's the Jasmine package is a big source of the problems I've had. So unless you just like need Jasmine specifically, I would say give it a few months. Like don't really try to use it. Otherwise, I would recommend starting with Mocha. I've had a lot better luck with that. And those are my 12 things I'd like to share with you. A couple more thoughts since I have like a minute and a half left. Going back to the second slide where I was like, Meteor solves big problems for you, and then you're left with like weirder problems. The biggest picture thought that I keep having about Meteor over the past year, especially the past like 6 months, is, oh shit, I changed focus here, is what about CSS? Because there's these two countervailing trends where on the one hand, like you have to write more and more CSS, and I love CSS, believe it or not, because devices are getting more diverse. There's Retina screens. Soon there's going to be smartwatches, and your boss is going to want to make your thing responsive on smartwatches. And then on the other hand, Meteor is making everything but CSS much easier. and faster. So the result is I feel like rather than like I'm a web developer and then I write a little CSS here and there, it's like I write CSS for a living and then every so often I build a web app. And that's a great problem to have, but that is now a major problem that I have is like I have all these tickets for like the Sprite Builder store, and the ones that intimidate me the most are not the like JavaScript based features. It's like, oh, I have to make this responsive. Oh man. So I would love to just like plant a seed in the minds of the core team, of other people who build Meteor tools, maybe Sasha Greif. Hold on. And just think, maybe further down the line, what would be some cool tools that might revolutionize the way we write CSS in the same way that Meteor has made everything else more awesome. So that's my talk. I just want to thank people at my company, my boss Colin, developers Kiana, Maria, and Emily. All of them have had a hand on the Sprite Builder store. And I also want to thank the Meteor team for having me and for making this cool product. Thanks.
Great. Thank you so much, Zach. We have 5 minutes for questions, so fire away.
Over there.
So in terms of using session variables less often, do you do anything besides template reactive bars? Like adding to the template data?
So the question was, what are some strategies for avoiding using session variables aside from reactive template variables? It's hard. I can't think of a way to answer that in the abstract. It really just depends on the specific feature I'm trying to build. But like helpers, events, there's other things at your disposal aside from. It's not that session variables are the devil. It's just like I don't think it should be like the tool you like always reach for first.
Any other questions for Zach? All right, if you're watching
Over there, in the striped shirt.
So I just loaded your page, the Sprite Builder store, and I opened up the network tab, and I'm getting 7.9 megabytes transferred and 7.8 seconds to load.
With 1 year experience, what's your comments on that?
So probably the reason for that, actually I know the reason for that, is that, so there's a bunch of like assets that are being loaded there, and I have not optimized that for performance basically. So so when it's like the smart thing to do is like there's a tile of like 16, 32 products, and those are actually very small images, and what I should be doing is like taking image magic and like taking the big versions and cropping them down and so on and so forth. And I'm just not doing that because like that's not our biggest problem right now. Like the culture at my company is a bit like rather than trying to make something perfect, we make it decent, and then we figure out what the next biggest problem is and we solve that. And so at some point this may become a problem, but right now it's just not what I'm optimizing for. And I think most of that is my fault. I don't think it's Meteor. I think it's me not cropping my images.
If you're watching the live stream online, you can tweet in questions for Zach using hashtag Devshop. Right. Any other questions from the room? I think I saw someone.